I think this is something that every store owner or manager has to wrestle with at some point or another, and while I think it's great that these organized play systems exist for games like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, HeroClix, 40K to a lesser extent, even though there's nothing really official from Games Workshop, there's a lot of resources out there for people that want to run tournaments and other games. It's awesome to engage your customers, give them some added value from the products they've already purchased, and showcase the promise of fun to be had in the future. It ends up eating a lot of your brain cells trying to coordinate all the different events, find judges or people that can run it and organize it, or you do it yourself, and then you've got everything else you've got to do. And it can just really eat up a lot of your time. And then, of course, setting all that aside, you still have to deal with prize support. Of course, prize support, like so many things, is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a great way to engage players and entice them into events you'd like them to participate in, but on the other hand, it can be a cause of great consternation because you have to figure out what's fair, what's profitable, what do people want, what don't they want. There's just a lot of facets you have to look at, and it can be really overwhelming, and so that's the topic of today's video. Prize support, whether it's in the form of store credit that you're giving out from the entry fees you've collected, or in the form of promos and limited edition figures or cards or whatever it is that you got from the manufacturer of the game, is an awesome tool in the game store owner's toolbox, but it can also cause you just as many problems in a lot of cases. The idea of a huge prize pool is really alluring, and you want to use it to entice players into your store. Players far and wide will come because of the legendary prizes you're going to give out. But it can also backfire on you because you end up getting some competitive level players that are now drawn by this really big prize pool that can crowd out your regular players. And they're not mutually exclusive to one another, but they also don't always draw the same crowd. A group of competitive players that are coming in for a Pro Tour qualifier are not necessarily going to be the same group of people that are showing up to play casual Friday Night Magic with their buddies and meet some new friends. Then, of course, you have to weigh the idea of whether or not you want to add to the prize pool on top of what is being paid in at entry fees, or if you want to just stick with what the entry fees are and reprize those out to everybody, or if you're going to take a cut to cover the overhead, because there's legitimate overhead when it comes to running an event. Somebody's got to keep track of scoring, and somebody's got to be available to officiate, whether it's you or another player, or you have a dedicated event staffer who can do it. These things all cost money and resources and time, which is one of your most valuable resources. Over the years, I think I've probably tried every amalgamation of prizing that was available, with the exception of taking a cut of the entry fees, but that's something you just have to take into consideration. As a rule, on the whole, and I'm not going to say this was 100% of the time, but let's say it was 99.7% of the time, we gave out as a store 100% of the entry fees that were paid in. And I made a point of letting the customers know that. I tried to post it in any of the event listings, or it was just common knowledge amongst the players that if you went to Gamers and you paid into the prize pool, 100% of that money was going to go back out to the players, whether it was in the form of participation prizes or, if you're just paying out to top 8 or top 3 or whatever it is you're doing. And I think that's the best way to go overall, and I'll explain why. Over the years, I ended up settling into 3 basic prize structures that work pretty well. Sometimes I've paid out way too many prizes because I was just trying to be gung-ho and get as many people as I could, and usually that's not as successful as you'd like it to be. And other times, I've structured the prize pool in such a way that we still gave out all of the prizes, but it was spread a little too thin amongst all the players. So while all the people that were below, top 8, let's say, were happy with what they got, the people that actually won the event didn't really feel like they won that much. So that's something you have to take into consideration as well. Now let's take a step back for a second and talk about the entry fees you're collecting. And something I always did, I don't know if this is common practice in the industry, but I never let anyone pay for an event entry with store credit. Whether it was store credit you won or store credit you had on hand because you had sold in cards or minis or whatever it was, event entry fees just always had to be paid, cash or card. There was no store credit that could be used to get into an event, and I felt like that kind of kept the prize pool, segregated into its own little pot, so we never had to worry about whether or not there was any weirdness going on. Because sometimes at the end of the day, it's not whether or not you can figure out if something does or doesn't make sense. Sometimes just pick the thing that's the easier thing to do so you don't have to figure it out later. Not everything needs to be a challenge that you have to solve. Now, the first way we would do it is we would give away product. We would take the entry fees. Let's say you have 20 guys that pay $5 a head to play Friday Night Magic. So you have $100, so you take the $100 and you say, okay, well, that would buy this many packs at retail. and then you divide that out amongst the people, whether you are somebody who wants to give everyone who finishes the event a pack, or you want to prize top 8 or top 3, or base it on the number of rounds you want. I've seen it done either way, but that's one way you can do it, is determine how much product at retail value or discounted as you see fit you can buy with said entry fees, and then determine how you're going to dole it out to people. And that's fine. It gets a little weird if that's not what somebody wants, because then it kind of devalues the prize, even though it isn't actually devaluing the prize. It is the value that it is. But if they don't want that, it's not worth anything to them. A box of Terminators is not a prize to a Magic player, and vice versa. A 40K player is not going to be super interested in a Commander deck. So you have to take that stuff into consideration as well. The second way to do it is to do store credit and do a percentage, like a X percentage to first place, to second place, and to third place. And then you could take the leftovers and say, okay, well, everyone gets a pack or whatever it is. Or if you're doing like a 40K event, you can say, okay, well, first place gets this, second place gets this, third place gets this, best painted gets this, and best sportsman gets that. And just divide it out so they're all getting something that adds up to 100% or 110% if you want to throw a little something in there yourself, or throw out a box or something. Games Workshop used to have a program where you could get so many dollars in free product to give away as incentives to get people to participate in events, and it seems like they stopped doing that. If you still own a store and you work with Games Workshop, let folks know down in the comments if that's something GW still does or if they nixed that. I think they nixed it right at the end of my tenure, and I don't think it came back. Now, before we get into the third and final way that I did store prizes, which was also my personal favorite way of doing them, I want to talk about store credit for a second because there is some administration around it. A lot of point-of-sale systems do have a way of keeping track of store credit that a customer has. You can put it on gift cards, whether they're electronic or the paper ones that you fill out. If you sell Magic singles and are hooked up with Crystal Commerce or Binder POS or something like that, then they have store credit built into the system, but still someone's got to keep track of it, and you ultimately are responsible for it. A customer can't lose store credit that's saved in the cloud or something. Not that you want them to lose their store credit, but it's something you have to take into account. What do they say, like 8% of all gift cards get lost and never used or something like that? That's not exactly something you're going to bank profits off of, as people losing gift certificates, but it's still something you don't want to have to keep track of or be liable for if you can avoid it. And then there's also the question of whether or not you want to merge store credit that was prize support with store credit that was earned by people selling you products, board games, D&D books, or whatever. It probably doesn't matter because those were both still money originally at one point, but maybe there's a reason that I can't think of to keep them separate. The fact is you still got to keep track of it. You got to watch for people that are trying to scam the system. You got to watch for people that legitimately made an honest mistake and they come in to buy something. They were sure they had $26 store credit, and now they've only got $18 store credit. And of course, that's not a hill that's worth dying on, so you just give them the difference and call it a day. Typically, people are not going to try and steal from you at $6 of store credit at a time, or whatever the math would be. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Most people are honest, and they just made a mistake, and it's not that big a deal. So you're helping them out. It's the kind of customer service you can offer, which is probably one of the reasons why this last version of prize support was my absolute favorite, not just because I also got to do some creative arty things that I like to do, but also because it put the burden of record keeping on the customer. So it's a lot easier for 1,000 people to keep track of 1,000 people's worth of stuff than it is for me to keep track of 1,000 people's worth of stuff, even if it's in a computer. It's still liable to data corruption, the system going down, you don't have access to it anymore, the internet goes down and nobody can use it. And so what I came up with was a prize token. And I'm going to step over here for a second so that I can show them. Here are some prize tokens. This one in particular, we gave away only to people that participated in our Magic the Gathering Amonkhet pre-release. That was the only way to get it. Incidentally, I think Amonkhet was the only pre-release where we legitimately sold out of every single pre-release pack. Was that because of this promo? I'm not saying it is, but I'm not saying that either. So, all these prize tokens, they have custom art that we had commissioned for these cards. There's little symbols on the side that goes to a weird game that I can explain later. But basically, the idea is that if you won, instead of giving people booster packs or store credit, you got one of these prize tokens. And as you can see from the text at the bottom of the prize token, you either got a booster pack, any standard booster pack, or if it wasn't Magic and you had one and you wanted Pokemon, you could get any in-print booster pack. And they couldn't be special packs. Of course, at the time, They didn't have draft boosters and, well, they didn't have all the special boosters that I can't think of what they all are now, but they didn't have like the 13 kinds of booster packs that Magic the Gathering has now. Or, and this was kind of the game changer as far as I was concerned, it was $4 off. So it was like a coupon, kind of. It's kind of like store credit coupon thing going on, but you could get $4 off, so you could save them up and, buy a D&D book with them if you want. It didn't matter what you used them on. You could use them on anything you wanted. But the thing that made them super epically cool was the fact that I found out later. I take no credit for this. I didn't even consider this as a possibility, and I feel kind of stupid because it seems like it should have been something I thought of, but I was just so focused on making sure that this would take care of this prize support stuff without creating some weird system that I'd have to retract later that I didn't think beyond that. But what customers were doing is they were winning the prize tokens. So if you won, let's say you won $40 store credit, now you're going to get 10 prize tokens, and they were putting them in their trade binder. That makes sense. I had them all made to Magic card sizes. They were made out of the same card stock as a Magic card. They felt and looked like a Magic card, except for the fact that they had a Gamer Sanctuary back, and they had, of course, their prize token thing on the front. Well, what people were doing is when they were at other stores and trading with people is they would have these prize tokens in their trade binder, and if you couldn't come up with an amicable trade with somebody, they would pop these things out and give them to people because a prize token never expired, and it didn't matter who had it. They weren't assigned to a given person, so anybody could give you a prize token, and you could go to Gamer Sanctuary and get a pack or $4 off, the single of your choice, or whatever you wanted. Box of Terminators if you suddenly decided you were done with Friday Night Magic and wanted to play 40K. And that was so awesome. It was like having tiny little advertisers going everywhere and promoting Gamer Sanctuary in other stores because the cards had an intrinsic value, so they became like trade fodder amongst all the local people. So they'd go to other stores, and it didn't matter if you didn't have a card somebody wanted. If you had prize tokens, you were good to go. So if they had a card valued at $10, boom, 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 there's 3 prize tokens. Maybe they give you a couple other cards, and you're good to go. Trade done. And then now we've got one more person that maybe hasn't been to Gamer Sanctuary before, says, you know what, I'm going to make a trip. I've got these prize tokens now. I'm going to come out. It was amazing and something I never thought of. So that was ultimately the best thing I think we ever came up with. You could give them out. People loved them. People traded them to other people. People took them to other stores. It was, I don't think I could have come up with a better thing. Now, I put these things on the side of the card, and they were shields and strikes, and the strikes had a power value, and I made up a game without a whole lot of thought. Came with a little play mat that I think was free or $5 or something. I don't remember, but it was just a little mat. It was like a third of a play mat, and it had little spaces on it, and you could put your cards on it, and when the icon on the side of the card lined up with another icon, it was like fighting. So if you put a token with a strike value of 4 next to a token with a strike value of 2, it would destroy it. If it was next to a token with a shield, the shields were unbreakable. It was really clunky and weird. It wasn't a great idea. Nobody really seemed to care about it. I don't know why I decided it needed this feature. It added no value. You didn't get anything if you won a game of prize fight. I mean, I guess you could gamble a token if you wanted to. It was very weird, and it's something I would not do again, but so that's what the symbols mean. They're of no importance. Okay, now that I've talked about how great prize tokens ended up being, I do have to say that there is a really big handicap to them, and that is that miniatures players and people that don't play TCGs typically didn't really care about the prize token cards. I'd heard of other stores who would make prize dice that were worth like $1 so they could save them. Kind of the same idea, just they were dice instead of cards. I never did that, although that was something I had planned on doing if I could figure out a cool way of doing it that wasn't just $1 a die, because that seems like it'd get really cumbersome if you're buying a box of Terminators with 50 dice. So that's the handicap to the prize tokens. But for the most part, it was a raging success. And I think that's everything I have to say on this subject. I don't want this video to be 28 minutes like my last one was, so hopefully I can cut this down to a little more condensed version and it's of some use to you. But no matter what the case is, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I am not claiming to be the expert. This is not the Game Store Gospel according to Chad. I'm just a guy who's been there and done that and telling you what my experience was. Your results may vary. Either way, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. If you would like to see the first video where I'm just waxing nostalgic about the game store I used to own, then go ahead and click right up there. It's like 28 minutes long, but I think I'm pretty coherent. I think it makes some sense, so that might be worth watching. In the meantime, though, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.